most original talk radio station anywhere. We are LA Talk Radio at latalkradio.com.
You're listening to Fouché Way with Brandon Fouché, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Fouché Way radio show, live every Thursday at 1 o'clock p.m., sponsored by the nonprofit organization called Canine Hope for Improvement Program, where we hope to improve the quality of our dogs' lives by moving towards a no-kill society. The number here is 818-602-4929. Well, first I'd like to say Happy New Year to each and every one of our listeners. And this year is starting off with over 16,000 listeners in November alone. Between the page reviews, the downloads from the website, iTunes and Sketcher downloads, I am very happy to know that we are going and growing in the new year. And that's important because dogs are dying every day. But before we get started, I'd like to first address a question that was on our Facebook page. And it's a good client of mine with two loving dogs, the name of Vita and Violet, and her name is Kelly Newfield. You know, it's no surprise to me that we look for in our dogs what we want from a best friend or a companion, because that's what dogs are. They are our best friends and they are our companions. And in a family, we have many roles that we will need to play. And we play these roles out depending on how many members there are and to what level the roles will have to be played. In other words, the roles will have to be a strong leader or a leader that's not so strong. It depends on your particular problem. Now, a problem can arise when we see ourselves in our dogs, and if there is more than one person looking at the same dog, we can reflect emotions that will require us to behave in opposite ways with that same dog. We are trying to make the dog like us in an emotional way. And if we can be successful with that, we think that the dog will love us more because that's what we need. But they are not like us. They have their own needs, they have their own language, and they have a behavior that is instinctive. What I like most about dogs is that they are not like us. You know, as people, we have types. We like to label things. Types that we like that help us to fulfill our needs. For an example, with a dog, we have the person that is a buddy type. That's the type that likes to hang out with their dogs. And then we have the soulmate type. That's the one that's possibly looking for unconditional love, and they look for that within their dogs. We have the mediator types, which is pretty much like myself. We want to make things work out. And then you have the carefree type, you know, Hakuna Matata type personality. And then we have the master type. That's the one that's controlling and demanding. And then we've got a professional type. My dog's the best. He's better than your dog. And then we have the extreme rescue type. That's the one who rescues because they love and they want to heal. And you know, this is so funny because with people comes pretense. With dogs, there is no pretense. They are what they are. What you see is what you get. So when you get two different types that are living in the same household with the same dog, you have to talk about what each of you need and would like to have and start there. It's really not that difficult, and it can be done. And the reason that it can be done is because a dog can have many meaningful relationships based on hierarchy. a mother gives birth, there can be anywhere from 1 to 12 puppies. And that one dog can have 11 different relationships that are based on hierarchy. It is in their DNA. So the answer to the question, if one person is working the Fouché way and the other person in the household is not, can the Fouché way still be effective? And I'm going to say yes in regards to the dog, because the dog can have a different relationship with each person in the house. But will that create conflict with your mate? And that is what we're going to be talking about today. And from my experience, if we both sit down and talk about the reason that we want the dog, what we would like to see and get from our dog, each person talks about that. There is a way to achieve that. And I've been through this before. Both people decide what they want. They call me up. I tell them how to get that. It's not very difficult at all. And it just so happens I received an email. I'd like to read it to you that just came yesterday in regards to this. And it goes like this. It says, Brandon, first of all, Happy New Year. Second, I have to tell you again how happy AJ and I have been since our session with you and our dog Stanley back in the day. It truly was such a gift to our lives to speak with you and have him evaluated and for us to learn how to communicate with him better. Our relationship as a family unit is so much better, and we generally just trust him more and are more relaxed, all because we are on the same page and communicating better. We tell everyone we meet about you and have sent so many people your way. I am actually interested to know if you can help a couple of friends of mine who live in the Boston area, where I am originally from. Do you do phone sessions for people, even if they cannot bring the dog in to meet you? Would you be interested in meeting the dog on Skype? Their dogs are not aggressive or anything, but they need help learning how to communicate with them for sure, especially in advance of their new baby coming. I told them to go ahead and fill out your questionnaire online. She really needs your help, and I'm sure there are people in Boston, but you are my favorite. So I told her to try you first. Lastly, speaking of babies, ours is due in March, and we are wondering if we could do a session with you in advance, just to talk about how we can best introduce our dogs when we get home. Thanks so much in advance for this and everything. Stephanie and AJ Draven. I wanted to read this email because this is exactly what we're talking about here. And it sounds like we're going to be doing another show on babies and dogs. And we will also have a segment that's coming out on the news about that very thing. And I will let your listeners know when they call me and let us know that we're going to air that with a previous client that was on. Her name was Nicole. And so with that, I'm going to start moving towards our next guest that I would like to talk to, and that's Paula Terrify. Did I say that right, Paula?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure did. Paula.
She's a veterinarian, and who in her practice, she has treated dogs with anxiety problems. Happy New Year to you, Paula.
Thank you, Brandon.
You're very welcome. You know, everyone is so interested in this subject because there's a lot of misconception about giving medication for dogs that are aggressive and understanding the difference between anxiety medication and aggression medication. And I know you don't deal with giving out medication for aggression, and I want you to explain to our listeners why you do what you do and why you don't give out medication for aggression. Can you kind of tell us?
Well, we're talking about different types of behaviors that dogs have, usually the bad behaviors when they start talking about their problems. And you kind of have to be a little bit of a psychologist to figure out what kind of dog you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do that, it's important to identify what the behavior is. And if you can, as veterinarians, we're really trained to have a medical background, and we're pretty well versed with drugs.
Mm-hmm.
We're really not given the tools to work with people with behavior problems, and our time constraints don't really allow it. So I pretty much will evaluate each dog,
mm-hmm.
listen to the story, do a medical examination on the dog. If it seems appropriate, I have used drugs in my practice, but mostly for separation anxiety. That's the number one treatment that we have as veterinarians, and we have had some success
mm-hmm.
in using some doggy Prozac. But you have to also combine that with behavior modification, and that's usually best left to people that want to work with problem behaviors,
mm-hmm.
People that are specially trained to do that. So we're there to provide the medical support and evaluate the patient, but then we're often calling in somebody else, like yourself,
mm-hmm.
that wants to work with these problem behavior dogs, because you really need to come at it with a combination approach. Now, in terms of aggression, because Brandon and I had talked earlier,
mm-hmm.
I don't see a doggy aggression being well-versed for any sort of type of a drug usage. But I will be clear on this. There's two types of aggression in the dog. One is fear-based aggression, and the other is dominant-based aggression. And you have to know what kind of aggression you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Every dog that shows aggressive isn't necessarily dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
The fear-based dog only becomes a danger if you don't respect the boundaries. That dog will usually warn you. The dog has body language, the dog looks away, the dog tries to get into a corner, the dog growls, and the closer you get, the more upset the dog becomes.
Mm-hmm.
Now those are signs of fear-based aggression, and that sometimes we will moderate with medication, but most of all, that is behavior modification as well. Now, dominant aggression, dogs that will just go after people or just go after other dogs,
mm-hmm.
In all my research, that's not there's no drug solution for a dog like that.
Mm-hmm.
That dog needs strict counseling and a lot of behavior work,
mm-hmm.
and teamed up with the right sort of a behaviorist or trainer, and having owners that will commit to a program. That's the only thing that could help turn that dog around.
Mm-hmm. And, you mentioned earlier that, you guys are not really versed in psychology, but also we can't assume that the problem is originating within the dog, and the person basically has to look at their lifestyle with their dog too. And I'm sure that a lot of the behavioral issues are going to come from, how we're living with our dogs, I like to look at things, as I mentioned to you, on a scale of 1 to 10, when we're deciding whether a dog is genetically has a problem or if this is a learned behavior. And I have found with dogs that have come to me that medication can work for those dogs that are truly have an anxiety problem. This medication may work on the 3. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, the dog is a 3. And then what I have found is whatever the dog has learned, that's usually what the person is having a problem with. Now, I don't know how you guys determine that, but is that pretty close? I mean, how do you determine?
Well, we're there to make an evaluation because we're aware of, dogs have lots of different difficult behaviors that
mm-hmm.
the owners are struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
We just try to sort it out and then get the dog the appropriate help.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what the key I'm trying to make is your veterinarian will do an assessment,
mm-hmm.
and it's always recommended that if your dog is behaving abnormally, that have a vet check them out too to make sure there's not some physical cause for this. Older dogs that are in pain can get snappy and things like that because they're just having arthritic pain and we need to relieve the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the first thing is to consult the vet. But if your dog needs some long-term behavior management, you're going to be working with somebody other than your veterinarian. Your vet can refer you to those people that need to work with you for the long term. And sometimes medication's appropriate, and sometimes it's not. But that's that decision usually is made by the veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, to emphasize, a lot of behavior problems, you don't need medication. It's really going to take a commitment from the owners and pairing up to get the right kind of support they can, working with someone like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes medication can help, but it's a bridge. It's a bridge, and people can't just pop a pill, have their dog just pop a pill and everything be good again. That's just a false assumption.
Mm-hmm.
The drugs may help, but you will need to do more.
And so it sounds like to me what I'm hearing, and I just want to be clear for our listeners too, is that, when you're giving out medication, I mean, there's a concept that there's fear aggression, dominance aggression, subdominance aggression. Some dogs are multi-layered, but you're saying there's just not enough evidence out there to point to medication solving dominance aggression or any other aggression except for like fear aggression and anxiety. Is that correct?
Yeah, fear-based dogs that are fearful, especially dogs that have anxiety. We really have had success with those dogs, especially when the medication is combined with behavior modification. Really, those two things are important. But again, just to be clear, and I know you want to make this point,
right.
Aggressive dogs are dangerous dogs, and they have to be considered dangerous. If a dog is not going to warn you before it bites or attacks, that is a dangerous dog, and that's a serious problem.
Right.
And there won't be some easy drug solution to that dog.
Good.
Not in my experience.
That's what we want to hear. People need to know that. You can't just give your dog a pill and think that everything is going to be okay. It just doesn't work that way. And can you give us some examples of what you would consider to be problems that you would prescribe medication for? Some types
the number one thing is separation anxiety, which is those are the dogs that become very anxious when the owners leave them, and they tear up the house, they chew on doors. I mean, they're very destructive. They can bark incessantly while you're gone. So, the number one, separation anxiety, those dogs aren't dangerous. Those dogs are just causing a lot of damage, and they're very stressed out dogs. So it's not good for them to sit around for 12 hours in your house and feel anxious. They suffer too, and that was, that's what you don't need to be aware of. And separation anxiety, people have anxiety disorders too, and if you know somebody with an anxiety disorder and your dog is having an anxiety disorder that your veterinarian can confirm, get this on the advice of your vet. Don't self-diagnose your own dog. Don't go on the internet to diagnose your dog. Get the proper diagnosis, because first you got to start there, and then we can roll out the treatment. But if you know anxiety is a real problem, we don't say, just lock the dog in a room and go to work all day. Those poor dogs suffer to different degrees, and we try to make people aware that we need to sometimes control that anxiety with medication while we try to change the environment and work with the dog.
I know, Doctor, you can't say specifically there is a certain time frame that this medication is going to work, but can you give us a ballpark estimate of once we decide that this is what it is and they're on medication, I mean, what can we realistically be looking at in order to actually kind of, see some...
Oh, you're looking usually at a 2-week window.
Oh, that's very nice.
And 2 weeks. Or less, and a lot of times the dose has to be modified. So when we pick a dose for a dog, we'll go 2 weeks, and then we'll reevaluate. So the dose, it's not, sometimes the dose requirements can be higher or lower than what the average dose is. So you have to titrate the dose to the effective endpoint. And so usually that takes 2 weeks on the medication, sometimes a month. And then you get the patient back, and then you find out if you need to modify the dose.
Now, is that something that the patient should be calling back in 2 weeks and saying, hey, I don't see any change? And
right, that can either be done over the phone, or the veterinarian may want to, observe the behavior or talk with you personally. But anyway, there needs to be a follow-up. 2 to 4 weeks after starting that kind of medication, there needs to be a follow-up.
Oh, that's good.
Sometimes the medication's not going to help, and we have multiple combinations of anti-anxiety drugs. So we start with one, we'll sometimes add another one, and we call it, sometimes it's cocktail therapy for some of these dogs. Again, that's what the veterinarian is good for, and so... And that's why the follow-up is so important.
And another thing, while we're talking about that, if we decide, because a lot of people, like you said, they look at and diagnose their own thing, but when you're taking a dog off of this medication, I mean, you just can't stop. Is that correct?
No, absolutely not. You will want to taper the dose.
Okay.
And you'll want to watch as you taper the dose down if the dog starts to relapse. So,
Okay.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I want everyone to understand. The bottom line here is when you have been prescribed some type of medication for your dog, you must stay in contact with your veterinarian. And if you decide you want to go off, or if the vet is saying that maybe we have to change things, you still have to call your vet. You cannot take this into your own hands because
I don't think it's a good idea. Yeah, I don't
Right.
think it's generally a good idea for people to play around with the dosing. But this sort of situation requires really good communication. You really have to get a veterinarian that's talking with you and following up with you, and you have to work together. I mean, it's a team approach.
Right. And doctor, that's exactly what I tell my clients when they come to see me. You have to communicate. You got to call back. You got to let me know what's going on. You can't say that everything is going okay and that was the reason why I didn't call you. It's not the way this works.
People are people. You just try the best you can to work with them and make them understand from the beginning how you want to approach the problem.
We got to let them know. Dogs are dying because we're not paying attention. And with that, I know you're busy, Doc, but I want you also do something very interesting that I want our listeners to know about. And can you kind of explain what else you do?
Yeah, as I was approaching the golden years a couple years ago, I started thinking about, what I could do to have a little bit more fun and have a more relaxed lifestyle.
Right.
And I really loved the desert, and I really was ready to get out of Orange County, where my practice was for 25 years.
Uh-huh.
And I bought an old hotel out in Desert Hot Springs, which is about 15, 20 minutes from Palm Springs.
Wow.
Because I really love the desert, and I really fell in love with the mineral water out here. We have a natural mineral water in Desert Hot Springs, so there's a lot of spas out here where people come to soak in the water.
Uh-huh.
At any rate, I thought it'd be fun to rehab this old little hotel and invite dog owners to come and bring their dogs. And so it's an off-leash environment,
Uh-huh.
and we have our own private dog park, and the dogs are really they get free rein here. And for most people that come here, if they've never been anywhere like it. We have no pet size restrictions, we add no pet fees, and we don't have any breed restrictions. But we have one very basic, important requirement. Dogs must be truly dog-friendly, because it only takes one dog to get into this environment, like a dog park situation, and cause problems.
Yeah.
So we're very, very strict on our dog-friendly policy. Unfortunately, we've had some people that love staying here but can't really come back because their dogs are not their dogs are not safe to be off-leash and approach other dogs. And so it's been sad for me to see the behavior problems at this level and know that these owners have difficult dogs, and they're not getting the help they need, and they can't enjoy their dogs to the full extent of just being able to socialize with other people, letting their dogs be social the way dogs normally are. And that's been my stress here, is I basically didn't come out here to work with problems. I just can't have them at my resort. And so from time to time, people have got to make other arrangements. They can't be here if their dogs can't be off-leash. Right. So, this isn't the kind of problem that is overall affects the life of the dog, but it's something that people are. I really do still think there's a lack of education out there, that people aren't even aware that there's help for their dogs. They're just sort of tolerating the behavior,
right.
Make excuses for the behavior, and they don't really know that there is help or they should get help.
Well, Doctor, we're going to have to get you some business cards out there, and you're just going to have to hand them out to those people that you turn away. And,
well, if
so
I could I'll just give, if anybody is listening and they're interested, if you just go to Mr. Google and you type in dog-friendly resorts in Desert Hot Springs, Google will take you right to me, because I am the ultimate dog-friendly resort. No one's doing anything like this yet.
Can you give us a number?
The hotel is the Dog Spa.
Can you give us a number? The Dog Spa.
Dog, yeah, it's one word. It's DOGSPA. It's Dog Spa Resort.
Okay.
It's in Desert Hot Springs. And
telephone number?
The phone number is 760-600-0246.
Okay. Well, Paula, thank you very much for coming on and talking to us about the anxiety medication. It's very important to us around here because, you know, there are many dogs who are being misdiagnosed, and we need to get the right dosage and the right medication and the right help for them. And I'm going to also have to come and visit you. Check
you have
it
an
out.
open invitation.
All right. I'll definitely take you up on that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Now, our next guest is first time on, but I've been knowing her for a little while now. Her name is Paula Villa. She has a wonderful dog named Mia. Happy New Year, Paula.
Happy New Year, Brandon.
Yes, it has been a good New Year, and I'm happy to be talking to you. And I know very quickly we want to talk about Mia. I want you to kind of tell us, because she's very interesting, I want you to tell us what has taken place in the past and how you came to know me. Tell us about Mia and you.
Okay. I saw Mia at a dog rescue, and she's super pretty and cute. And
in L.A.? In L.A.?
She's a great dog. Sorry?
In L.A.? Where was the rescue? Do you remember?
It was in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And she was just darling and like about a 35-pound dog, gray, a mix. I didn't know what she was.
Uh-huh.
They told me she just loved car rides and was just a very fun dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I took her, and she did love car rides, but they didn't tell me that also she's people aggressive, food aggressive, dog aggressive, afraid of children, afraid of men, just dominant and afraid type of a dog.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Well, yeah, we have nightmares about these types of dogs, you know?
Oh, I had real nightmares in life, you know, because by then I fell in love with her, and she's a very fun, cute dog. But, you know, like you say, it's such a responsibility, and she would attack men. She attacked the child, but luckily I caught her.
All right.
I only found out these issues through her actions, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Every dog she met, her hair went up. She was in a dog fight, and even though nobody was hurt, I still got sued.
Mm.
And it was just a very stressful situation. She was expelled from a dog school for biting a nice dog for no reason who just walked by her.
Mm-hmm.
I sent it to a very well-known trainer, and that he just obviously couldn't handle her because he put an electric collar on her, which I didn't want.
Mm.
So I did not continue.
So you guys talked about that, the collar, or that?
Well, I didn't know about it until I went to pick her up, and she was wearing it. And he said that she just caused a lot of fights. She caused a lot of chaos within the pack.
I see. Okay. And so from there, how did you actually find me?
Well, the dog officers in Santa Monica knew me from always walking the dog and always trying, and they knew my plight.
Mm-hmm.
They recommended you to me for being very good with, all these kinds of issues.
Oh, great. I didn't know that. Okay. And so you came to see me. I think, was it you and your husband or just you at the time? I can't remember your...
My husband and I.
Yeah, I think you both came.
Came to your first location, yeah.
Okay. And, you told me this story about this dog. I'm looking down at this dog and I'm saying... You gotta be kidding. little tiny thing.
She can cause damage.
Yeah, but if you guys go on the Facebook and check her out, she's just a little bitty thing. I don't even, So anyway, she comes to me. I don't remember you telling me all that, but I mean, you told me that she had a problem with other dogs. And I said, okay, we didn't even do rehabilitation. She was just boarding and socialization with me. Is that correct?
Well, you brought her into your camp, which is, rehab for a dog like this.
Right.
And I said to you a million things before you took her. She's going to bite dogs. She's a problem. I mean, she'd been literally expelled. And you just took her and said to me, she's not going to be a problem.
Right.
That was music to my ears.
Exactly. And tell our listeners how you felt when you saw the videos.
Well, I said, but how are you going to do it? And you said, well, I'll do it and the dogs will do it. And you took a video of her first day, which consisted of her being way in the back in a cage, and all your dogs came out, and a group of them were running down, your space towards her cage, and they went in just so friendly with their their tails wagging to greet her and to say hello. And big dogs, and I think a wolf was in there, and she was shaking so hard and seated and snarling and just in a state.
Now let me explain what's happening there. When we see our dogs in this state where they are shaking, they want to move. If you've ever watched greyhounds or little miniature greyhounds, you'll see them when they're sitting still, they're just shaking. That's an indication of their speed and their energy level, the reactivity of the nervous system. And what's happening is that's all taking place, but no one is being aggressive with her. Okay? And so that's her way of calming down. But they have to experience that. It's called flooding. But you have to know what dogs you can do that with, because some dogs it sets off. But she became calm. She accepted it. How did that make you feel?
Oh, my God. The whole thing was shocking because you sent me a series of days, like day 1, day 2, week 2, month, and then later as I continued to board, month 2. And the change in behavior was just shocking.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it.
I remember your husband would say, what happened? What did you do? What's going on? Because I remember you couldn't walk her down the street, remember, in Santa Monica or something?
I couldn't walk her down the street because she would lurch at everybody. And now, Brandon, we just came from having a cappuccino at the cafe down the street, her and I. They know her there.
Which leads me to this funny story. I think you know what I'm going to say. I get a call from Leroy one day. He's at the dog park. He calls me. He says, hey, I see Mia and Paula. I said, in the dog park? He said, no. They're out there hiding on the outskirts of the dog park.
Looking in.
I said, hey, man, go get her. So Leroy said, okay. So tell me about that, because I wasn't there. He went to get you.
Well, I'm only going to attempt so much without you. I wanted her to be with other dogs, so we would go and smell at the fence, but I was very afraid to go in there. And Leroy caught me and said, oh, no. And he took her, and we went in, and we stayed in there about an hour and a half with him.
Right.
And she walked around and smelled, and, she was very good.
Yeah.
But, it was scary to me without, having one of you guys with me there.
Yeah, and you know what? This is, we've got to get beyond that. I mean, your dog has come to me for some time now. She's with big dogs, little dogs. I mean, you name it, all different types of personalities. She is totally ready, and we've got to get you there. And the way it works when you first come in, you and your dog are at one place. Then once your dog goes through rehab or socialization and your dog moves on, now it's time for us to get you in the place where your dog has gone because they moved on, okay? And this is what we're going to be doing with you now. And so I'm so happy that you're on the show because our next guest is a family therapist, which is Al Potash, and we're going to talk about, relationship problems with the family, because when you adopt a dog into your life, they become a family member, like Mia became a family member, okay?
Uh-huh.
And if you're having problems, then you got to get help. Otherwise, it becomes dysfunctional, okay? And it's time now for you to move on. And I want to talk to Al, and I want you to listen to this, and we're going to talk. And this is not just a family therapist. He was also a client of mine. And I want to say Happy New Year to Al. How are you, Al?
I'm great. I'm really happy to be talking with you.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here, too, because, you know, I always talk on this show about relationships. And having a dog is like being in a relationship. And I thought about you because you being a family therapist, you deal with people in their relationships all the time.
You know, the metaphor just continues. It's so interesting. You know, you said, well, you're bringing in a new family member. Sometimes I work with families where you have to combine stepchildren. And, you know, and it's really going to be chaotic because everybody's, the children are thinking, is my position going to be okay? Am I going to lose status in the family? And then they act a little like dogs. There's all kinds of chaos and jealousy and all of that. So if you don't have the two pack leaders, mom and dad, really working together, it just can get terribly horrific.
And just that, what you just said, Al, you know, I'm thinking about people that adopt dogs. It's just like sometimes when you adopt another child and bring them into the home, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's a certain process that has to go through where the mother may be thinking this is the best thing for the children, and the father may be thinking that this is the best thing for the children.
Right. You know, and there's the split. Even in families that aren't blended, it's sort of the goal of the kids to, Julius Caesar coined it, you divide and conquer. You have the kids just putting a wedge between mom and dad, playing them off on each other, and then they merrily dance along and get whatever it is they wanted in the first place while the parents were arguing about what to do with him or her. So it's astounding, you know, that whole, and it's really not strategized. It just happens because that's the way the groups work out in the family.
Okay. And we're all trying to get something. We're all trying to get love.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And
the security and, love and, being accepted.
And, you know, I mentioned earlier about dogs being hardwired for what they need, and they need the love from hierarchy and the security of knowing that they have a leader. And that's not too far from the kids, right?
Well, you know, and I just have to give a little bit of a professional disclaimer. I'm not saying we should treat our children like dogs because they're different. I mean, dogs don't have foreheads. And that's the place where, you know, the cerebellum is located. That's where the higher level of thinking is.
Okay.
Of course, with children and teenagers, that's not completely developed yet.
So it's hormonal.
So I guess maybe they are similar to dogs.
Well, you just said something now that sparked something in me. So what you're saying with the kids, even though it's not developed right, so we're dealing with hormones.
Yes. Yeah, you're going on the lower part of the brain, more towards the, well, not to get technical, but the limbic system. That's where the major functions are for, breathing and instinct is what you said, and also the limbic system, which has to do with arousal or feelings.
Okay.
And so it's so important that dogs and kids sometimes don't self-regulate themselves very well.
Right.
But they think they're, they think they're smarter than us. And, you have this problem of trying to contain the kid so they can become self-regulating.
Interesting, because, I'm always talking about hormones within the dog.
Right.
This is a hormonal problem.
Yeah.
This is a learned behavior. This is genetic. And if they are operating on that level, then, of course, this is the reason why I talk against training, because this is not a training problem. This is an emotional problem. And because it is, in order to solve it with our dogs, we have to come out of our comfort level as humans.
Boy, that's that's profound, because I experienced that myself, and I work with that with clients. Let's say, I have a client where, two people fall in love, and let's say the woman has 2 kids, and the husband's good with kids, and he joins the family, and at a certain point, if the wife says, I'm the only one who's actually going to discipline the kids. Laterally disarms the husband, who's co-leader. And what message do you think the kids get in terms of the pack mentality?
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. It's terribly chaotic, and I'm getting back to your idea about the comfort zone. Well, this mom has been a single mom. She's kind of set the paradigm and the rules. Her comfort zone is the way things are working, equilibrium. You bring in another person, a husband, and all of a sudden the equilibrium is off, and people rush back to their comfort zone, which isn't always very comfortable, to reestablish that kind of balance, not realizing that the fact that there's a new person, there will be an imbalance and things will be off kilter.
Wow. This is so
you either
interesting.
Work with that, or you go back to the old system that will not work with the new situation.
Yeah, because I often tell people, when you introduce another dog into the pack, which could be considered the family, the equation changes.
Yeah.
Things have to start over again to reassess what's happening and where the leaders are and who's what and who's supposed to be where. So you're saying it's pretty much the same thing with the kids when you bring someone in.
Absolutely, because there is going to be chaos because everybody's kind of reassessing their roles, their positions, and you're right. It is going to be chaotic, but it doesn't have to be awful, and it doesn't have to be sustained.
Now,
if you're not able to reintroduce that new person into the pack, it's always going to be off balance.
And then when you have aggression involved, let's say a child is being aggressive, I mean, that changes everything.
Then kids can't learn to self-monitor because their limbic system, like the dog's, kicks in. They get into strong feelings. In my profession, we call it arousal, and boy, all the neurons are firing off. There's not much reasoning. And part of that's because the frontal brain isn't that well developed. Okay. You really have to contain, you would call it aggression. I call it excitation.
Okay.
And then have the kid or the dog learn to self-regulate, that they don't have to go like a rocket taking off. And they can actually learn to self-modify or self-soothe themselves so that the reasoning can happen.
Okay, and I want to be a little more clearer here. Are we talking like, would jealousy come under that umbrella?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was a brilliant book, it must have been 30 years ago. It was called The Politics of the Family. And the premise is, when you have 2 people, you have a dyad. You add a third person, and you have politics, because then you start factions. It's like you and me are okay, but that person is on the outside. But then all of a sudden I may start an alliance with that person, and you're on the outside.
That happens a lot in the dogs. With the dogs,
right?
When you have multiple dogs. Oh, yeah. Sometimes they'll pack up on the one that's weaker. Or they won't play physically with a particular dog. And we say that these dogs just tolerate, looking for a reason to act up. And it's all emotional and based on jealousy. And I often tell my clients that they must be mediators to step in when they see these types of jealousies taking place. Yeah.
Well, and then back again at you when you talked about the comfort zone. These, the people that I see are bright people. With the family issues that they're coming in with, it's not lack of intellect. There might be a problem with insight. Like, I'll give a really great example. When I brought my dog Baxter, the Boston Terrier, and you assessed him. You had him there for a while, and then I came back and you said, "Well, Al, I've assessed your dog, and he's absolutely fine, but I'm willing to train you.
Did I? I don't. I actually said that.
Well, that was what I got, and I went, oh, okay, so he's okay, and then you made me stretch out of my comfort zone,
Okay.
which was to act in a different manner instead of doing what I was doing before harder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And tell our listeners what was happening. I mean, because yours is not a simple problem.
Well, he's great. We got him from a rescue, and he's just a great little dog. And we had him, and pretty much reviewing with you, we did everything wrong because of our paradigm, which is you just love them and give them a biscuit, and everybody will be happy.
Right.
Well, not in our world. We were the third family that it was sort of his last chance because he would get aggressive with the male in the house. And in my case, I'd spend the whole day with him, and he was fine. As soon as my wife Marion came home, he'd start growling at me. Mm-hmm. And then he'd start to challenge me, and it was really kind of uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And what we thought, well, Hussy, what do we deal with that? Well, Marion will deal with them.
Right.
Don't you see that in families? You deal with your kids.
Exactly.
It's just so funny and so there she was, and she would handle him, and he would kind of calm down, but he'd be giving me that doggy mean look, eyeballing me.
Like a spoiled kid.
And there it is. There's the politics. It's she and him and me. I'm on the outside.
And what's some of the things? What did he do? I mean,
well, we got some bad advice. We talked to a trainer in Torrance, and she said, "Oh, that's okay. He's just breaking." And when he gets aggressive, make sure you have a bottle of water and you just squirt him in the face.
Right.
And I thought, yeah, I think I've seen that on the internet. That's brilliant. And so we had the situation where I'm sitting there with him. Marion enters the room. He starts growling.
What was that?
And he's coming after me, and I grabbed the bottle and punched him in the face.
Right.
And then he just became enraged. And then he was completely out of control. And then he lunged at my trigger finger and opened it up. I needed 8 sutures.
Wow.
And I thought, well, no, that didn't seem like a good idea. That just inflamed him. It didn't actually distract or do anything positive.
Right.
So we're thinking, boy, nice dog, but I really can't be getting bitten and intimidated. It was scary.
Yeah.
That this little guy could actually draw blood.
Right, exactly. Very strong.
Oh, and so anyway, what was her name? Colleen from the Dexter Foundation recommended you, and she was just really committed to Baxter.
Good.
And we had him stay with you, and that's when you assessed him. You thought, well, maybe he's an alpha, maybe he's a beta. And it turns out he's not really any of that.
That's right.
He had a little confusion in the house that was actually Marion and my creation.
Right. And, all through, as you mentioned earlier, positive reinforcement. And I want you to tell our listeners, it's not that you can't do positive reinforcement, is that you must also show the leadership. And now I believe you take him to dog parks. I mean, you do everything with him. You don't have those problems anymore.
No problems at all.
Right.
What happened is, well, first of all, you pointed out that he doesn't get to just go wherever he wants in the house. He has to have a place to sleep. He's in the laundry room.
Right.
He has a bed. He has his blanket. And that's where he goes. Before that, he would just sleep multiple places wherever he felt like it.
Right.
And he said that's not being generous. That's actually confusing him.
Absolutely. They need to know where their place is.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally. And then figuratively, I had to, this was really, really difficult because I love the guy, but we put a muzzle on him and went home waiting for Marion. It was all staged. When she came in the door, and he growled at me. I did as you instructed. I flipped him on his back, held him down, and said, "No, no." And then with disdain, I shoved him away and pointed and said, "Go."
Right.
Sounds a little dramatic, but I only had to do it once, Brandon.
Yeah, and this is interesting because I'm glad you said that, because as I mentioned earlier with the doctors, there's different types of aggression. There's fear aggression, dominance aggression, subdominance aggression. Some dogs are multi-layered, and we talked about dominance aggression and fear aggression, but there are different layers in that. And that's why it's important to evaluate the dog. And once the evaluation takes place, we can tell you exactly what you should and should not be doing. And once he was evaluated, we saw exactly what he needed, because some dogs are mentally dominant and physically submissive, or physically dominant and mentally submissive, and that's why I had you do what you did. And to this day, you've been living wonderfully with your dog.
Yeah, and it's just great. Now it's about my comfort zone, where I don't want to kill him with kindness either. Where we'll be watching TV, eating on a TV tray, and he starts kind of nosing his way in, and then he's kind of begging, and then he's on your lap, and then his face is near your plate, and it was really, really hard to shove him on the floor and say no, no. Which reminds me of a short story. I took him in for an exam with our veterinarian, and I'm sitting next to a woman with this enormously fat Chihuahua. I didn't know it was a Chihuahua, and I, being curious, I said, "Well, gosh, what's up with your dog?" And she said, "Well, he's grossly obese." And I thought, wow, does he know how to use a can opener?
Right, exactly.
and I just bid my tongue, and she said, yeah, he comes over to me and he begs with these soulful eyes, and he whimpers and cries, and then I give him a treat, and it makes him so happy, and then I feel really good.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, this dog is going to be loved to death.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it sounds like we're going to have to get more into this, and I'm definitely going to want you back on the show, because it so parallels what we're talking about with dogs and what you're doing with the family. And I hope that you will accompany us and be on the show again. The time is rolling. We're already behind time, and I want to thank you, Al, for coming on.
Sure.
And I want to thank Paula, both the Paulas, for being on. And once again, Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you for coming on the Fouché Way radio show. We'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Okay.
You're listening to Fouché Way with Brandon Fouché, right here on LA Talk Radio.